Good evening and welcome to the February 24th meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. Before we start, I ask that any electronic devices, cell phones, would you please silence them? Greatly appreciated. If you're here to speak on any of the applications tonight, we encourage you to do so. We just ask that you take the podium and give your name for the recording secretary. All right, and please speak into the microphone because it is being recorded by FCTV. All right, first up tonight is request for determination of applicability. Joseph McGuire, 97 Green Pond Road, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to pump and remove the existing septic system and replace with a new Title V sewage disposal system. Jen.
Staff is recommending a -2 under the state and the bylaw with the resource area boundaries not confirmed.
So moved. Second.
I got Betsy and Maury. Any other comments or questions from the commission? None? Comments or questions from the public? I'm sorry, Mike?
On the landscape pertaining to the fill, we're going to have that resolved before, while we have construction going on?
Staff will be working with Mr. Martin and the owner, so I guess. Dave, has Mark reached out to you about the dock or the little retaining wall?
Chairman David Martin, for the record here for the applicant.
Hey,
Mark reached out to me today. We spoke on the phone about this.
Okay.
And I agreed to work with Mark and the owner
Excellent.
to the best of my ability.
Thank you, sir.
Which is
Okay, that's
considerable,
good. I mean,
right?
we have an iron in the fire.
Yeah.
We're certainly not going to hold this up. but-
No.
All right, there you go.
Okay, anything else on the commission there? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved.
I have to recuse myself.
Okay, next up, Kristen is recusing herself. You get that, Susan? Okay. Kenneth and Kristen Alexander, 101 Cumloden Drive, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to build a wooden surface on concrete blocks over crushed stone and to construct a 58 square foot addition over the existing patio. Jen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the staff is recommending a -2 under the state and the bylaw with the resource area boundaries not confirmed.
So moved.
Second.
I got Mike Powers and Mary on the second. Comments or questions from the commission? Comments or questions from the public? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved. Okay, now we get on to the fun part here. Other business tonight. Little Pond Restoration Update. Horsley and Witten will be presenting the Phase 1.25.
Phase 1,
Concept.
25%
I'm sorry,
concept.
Phase 1, 25%. Addition over, concept design.
Yep.
Jeez, Phase 1.
Do you want me to drag a chair over?
No, I wouldn't want to
No, I'd rather have
do your job. God forbid.
you have a chair. Oh, you got it.
Thank you.
Oh, can I have one more thing with you from this from the mayor?
Thank you.
Oh, the first thing I did was turn it too fast.
Why does that look so dark?
I blew it.
No, I can't see anything.
Just start again here.
Jamie, can you turn one light on? Yeah, that's fine, thank you.
No.
No, that one's good.
Maybe the ones that have the orange marks on above it, you can see the switches, those are usually the only two that go off.
Sam's gonna mark.
Oh, Susan, here's-
That's why Betsy's in charge.
Good evening. I'm Amy Ball from Horsley Witten Group. I have Hannah Carlson here with me as well. We're here to sort of give you the overview of the concept plans for the Little Pond Conservation Area. I know many of the commissioners and some of the public were here a couple of years ago. The project, that way. I am technology impaired. How do I
Join the club.
hit escape?
Betsy, you know how to do this?
Well, you can do it on that.
Oh, okay.
You might have to just put this thing down. The Little Pond Conservation Area is a long little pond, obviously. It was created a number of years ago through a subdivision of a larger parcel and resulted in about a 9.6 acre parcel of land that was then set aside under a conservation restriction for the purpose of creating conservation lands.
You have arrows?
Is it because this is on, do you think?
Do you have arrows there?
I have left and right buttons, and that's what I pushed last time and ended up with that, but.
Right here is all the way to the right of the keyboard.
I got it. One of us hit something.
Hannah, you're the expert.
So this is just a general location of where the site is. Go ahead. Or maybe it was me then.
Oh, boy.
There we go.
Space bar.
And a couple of years ago, we also went through a master planning process. It was a public process, obviously, where we had up to 3 public meetings and kind of came up with a master plan design that covered sort of a phased approach to the project. And now we're at a point where we've got a conceptual design based upon the outcome of the master plan, as well as some of the constraints that we were talking about in terms of moving forward with the project. Okay, this is just a quick reminder, this was a much larger parcel, about 21, 22 acres, I believe. The turquoise parcel to the right is the land we're talking about. We should note that the building at the top here, this is just not going to work. The building at the top is not there. It's been demolished as part of the development of the conservation area. So during the master plan process, and I won't go through this very long, we went out and did an existing conditions assessment, identified existing constraints, existing areas of interest, things like the Osprey Nest, identified areas of existing pathways, all fairly informal, one a fairly large road-like area, gravel road, and then smaller footpaths that had gone off into the woods. We also identified a number of areas that were well poised for some land management and restoration. Got an awful lot of invasive species out of this property. And so over the course of the master planning process, we found that that was one of the priorities of making this a nice conservation land. So we identified in the master plan these vegetation habitat restoration areas. We also identified access not only within the parcel itself, but also the access off of Spring Bars Road. The way the subdivision worked when it occurred, the elements of the property that were most environmentally sensitive, there's an Atlantic white cedar swamp on this parcel. There's at least one, if not 2, vernal pool areas, and an awful lot of wetland resource areas, including Little Pond itself and the bordering vegetated wetlands and coastal banks, and the whole site is under land subject to coastal storm flowage. So it has a lot of elements that were worth preserving, and so you ended up with an interesting shaped parcel, for lack of a better word. So the path and the access off of Spring Bars Road was actually under the existing old parcel before it was subdivided. That access point off of Spring Bars Road is on the other parcel now. And so we had to find another way to create access off of Spring Bars Road that would maintain this area as a conservation area only, to create that sense of place there. And then with that, we also have to have some considerations for ADA accessible pathways, any boardwalks that might have been identified during the master plan, a parking area for visitors. And then we also wanted to identify a certain number of, site elements, the types of things that would be allowable under the conservation restriction, allowable uses, but would also be beneficial to the public users. And finally, we also looked at the scenic resource areas, the views. There are lovely views of the pond, there are views of the woodlands, there are views of the osprey nest, but there are some other views of adjacent buildings that are less desirable in a conservation land. So we identified all of that. And we also identified a means of going forward with the project in a phased manner. And so what we ended up with, this is just a visual from the master plan. Go ahead again. What we ended up with was the conceptual design. So I'm going to turn this over to Hannah. She's our landscape architect who's done quite a bit of this work and can probably speak to it better than I can.
Space.
Hello, everyone. Hannah Carlson. As Amy was saying, this project really takes on the phase 1 part of the master plan that we had previously put together. So there are items that aren't included in this phase, such as access to what is now kind of a launch, a kayak launch of sorts, if you want to call it that. And in other phases, we had recommended access to that point, and also other access points that utilize the existing trails and take you a little bit further into the site. But really, phase 1 just focuses on getting people to the conservation land, enabling them to access it via this particular parcel, park there, use an accessible trail, and have view sheds, have seating, have these elements that people would expect on a piece of conservation land. So, as Amy was saying, access off Spring Barge Road. Originally, I'm not sure if this works, but originally, as Amy said, was coming down from the other parcel. So we needed to find an access point off of Spring Barge Road to get people onto this piece of land. And that area is the lowest point, an area where there's already a bit of a road there, so minimizing any disturbance in that area. We are showing a parking concept, and then that primary path that's basically following the existing larger road that's there, but in some areas had to be shifted due to that road actually following along on the other piece of property.
You can
So-
take
You
the
can
mic-
take it with you.
Take it with you, the microphone.
So, as you can see, the existing road kind of went down through here, and so in order to facilitate that main access trail, we had to shift it onto the property itself. So then the restoration areas are defined by those 3 different color tones. There's that more yellowish tone, the green, and the more brown color, as you can see on your maps in front of you. And those are the meadow, the edge habitat, and the enhanced buffers that we had identified previously in the master plan, ones that really rely on our site analysis originally to help us determine what the spaces should be, using the native plants that exist there right now to help inform our decisions, and then increasing buffer where it's needed along the properties to either help frame or create screening. And then that edge habitat to kind of create that transition where there are buffers, or where there will be buffers, to where there might be more open meadow areas. Amenities include seating, and really in phase 1 it's more informal seating. There's nothing very formal proposed. More natural materials would potentially be used, and then there would also be signage, so different kinds of interpretive signage telling people where they are, how this place came to be, and then also maybe smaller interpretive signs where people might learn a little bit about the nature of the place. And then a kiosk up at the front. Let's see, and then so these are some of the materials of the things that I just described. The wood fence, actually, if you'd go, can we go back? Yes. Look. Thank you.
Holding out on you.
So the wood fence, just since it doesn't jump out at you on the plan, but it's just right here, and this is one of the ideas. You can move forward again. Just to, as these buffers and restoration areas are establishing themselves, we wanted to kind of reinforce both protecting these areas so that people don't walk off and trample newly planted plants or areas where we've seeded, but also to help lead people down that trail instead of people creating, so to speak, goat paths onto the other property. So we really want to reinforce this trail that we're designing so that that becomes what people do and how people move through the space. And that would be a crushed stone dust path. And the parking lot is a crushed gravel is what we're recommending. So pretty pervious, pretty informal. This is a precedent from the Norman Bird Sanctuary in Newport of the parking lot, but a lot of our ideas and precedents came as we were doing research for the master plan, and a lot of them were basically conservation land in areas on the Cape. So like the informal seating, sitting on a log that is from a local place. So the informal seating would be something like logs or just boulders and more just naturalistic places where people would sit. There might be some just slightly more formalized seating so that people could have a place when they get out of their cars to, get their bags set and head off, or maybe another place where we wouldn't need to worry about that material decomposing, things like that. And then along the bottom are really just is an array of the types of signs. So an entrance sign on Spring Bars Road to make sure that people know that this exists, to make sure that they feel welcome, that there's a place to come into. It's a little bit hard to see from the road, so we're going to try and just make sure that where that entrance road is, that you have those sight lines so that you can see that there's something there, a parking lot to get to, but we're really trying to not disturb too much of that area right along the road. There's a lot of nice vegetation there, but we do want to make sure we address concerns about visibility. The park map and kiosk, this is kind of the proposed style that we are thinking, and then various kind of levels of interpretive signage where you might have a couple spots where it's a larger sign and other areas where maybe it's just little small ones that identify the native plants that you might see in the area. And then the different plant species, those 3 zones that I had called out before, the meadow, the edge, and the buffer, we came up with suggested or proposed conceptual plant lists based off of what we've seen in those areas, and also just what we find in this around Cape Cod locally, and also what we think is native and can take root and do well, especially in these areas, considering the historical usage of the site, making sure that especially in areas like the meadow, that the plants we select are going to be able to actually thrive without as much maintenance as might be needed, in a more park-like setting and things like that. So I think that's it. Yeah, go for it. Pass it back over to Amy. And this lovely pointer in the bottom here.
There's not much to play on this one. So, obviously, we're before the Conservation Commission not only because you were sort of a sponsor of this particular project through your conservation from Alex Brandt, But we have a lot of site constraints, we recognize that. We also recognize the sort of existing somewhat disturbed area based upon the past land uses. And, you know, the intention here is to create conservation land that will work with the site conditions, improve site conditions, and also be, you know, aware of the permitting aspects of the project. So as far as the next steps are concerned, based upon some feedback that we have or will get on the concept plan, then we'll take that to project design and then ultimately to project permitting, which will be before your commission. And then, you know, a little further down the line, we're looking at project implementation, at least of this first phase. So I think with that, that's the last slide, right? We'll just turn it back over for any feedback that you may have or any comments.
Okay. Jen?
No, you guys good?
You all set?
Yeah.
Any comments, questions?
I just had one question.
Yes.
On the maintenance of all of this, where does that come in?
Well, I think in terms of the creation of some of this restoration habitat, that's going to be probably a multi-year effort and long-term monitoring of the area. We had talked a little bit during the master planning process of creating some sort of a friends group or having some sort of volunteer assistance to help with that.
Okay, thank you.
But fully recognize that that's going to be a
Recognize that
long-term
issue.
issue. Do you
Mike?
comment? Oh.
How far to the south of the current limit is the access to the pond? Where the kayak dock will be?
Let's see if we can get this, can you get this back on? Let's see if you can get to, go to number 5. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, so the existing access is here, it's
Yep.
not on the property. Proposed access is going to be approximately here. Existing unpermitted, slightly dilapidated pieces of wooden area with a sort of path down to the water is right in this location. So there's a, gosh, what is that, a couple hundred feet? 600?
The access is going to be off this road in the phase 1?
No.
Or is it further south?
Which access? The access
To
to
the-
the parcel
to Little
itself would
Pond.
have to be part of,
Your kayak launch, wherever that,
the kayak launch for now is not going to be part of Phase 1.
how far to
we
the
won't-
south of where you are is the question.
Well, we're thinking, you know, in terms of where that would make sense, you would want to probably work with an area that may be, you know, existing somewhat disturbed area so that you don't have to go into an area further south or north of that existing launch and then go into more native plant communities
Okay.
and add to
And
the
I guess my
disturbance.
point is, the parking for this phase is going to serve the kayak launch when it's made, when it's created?
Ultimately, yes. I mean, the parking is meant to
How long
serve,
of a walk is it from the parking lot to the launch?
that's what we thought, about 600 feet? Is that right? Plan would probably
1 to 60.
Yeah, I think probably, maybe even 500 feet.
500 feet.
So you either carry the kayak or you have wheels.
Like a
bring it
dolly
down
or
and have to
something.
Bring the wheels all the way back to the parking lot. And
This
it's,
is
you
to
got
invite-
this,
that-
it doesn't seem real friendly, I guess is my observation. And it is, and I've only one opinion, but it is one of the attractions of that piece of property. It does give you access to Little Pond, which is
Right, no,
It's
and
challenged,
we
I
understand
guess.
that. That was definitely one of the challenges during the master
anything you
plan.
can do to, from my perspective, to keep it and get that access for the kayaks would be a good thing. I'm good.
Anyone else? Betsy? Mary?
No, I'm glad to see the project, having been involved at various stages with this project over the years. It's nice to see it's gotten to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Kristen?
Yeah, I haven't been there, and you said something about the white cedar. Is that still alive, or is that?
Oh, yes,
yeah.
yes,
Is it?
the Atlantic
Okay,
White,
great.
maybe go to like an aerial.
It's really
It's in here.
entire area, and there's even a little patch here as well.
You can even see on the aerial pretty clearly, the dark green right here and then there. And there's a small sort of connector, almost like a stream connector between the two.
That's phase 2.
3.
Possibly three.
All set?
No, I'm good.
All set? Okay. Sure. Please.
Okay, sure. Let me give you the microphone.
Hi, Linda Deegan. I'm a citizen of Falmouth and was actually on the Conservation Commission when we got this. One question I'm wondering is that area where you're proposing to put the new entrance, is the cut through the coastal bank there already?
It is. If
Perfect.
if you see it on the, here, you can see it a little bit better on this. There are 2 segments of coastal bank, and then there's sort of a depression in between them.
Yeah, I thought that was true.
Right, yeah, I mean, the intent here is to work with what we have and try to minimize any disturbance, new disturbance of existing native vegetation, and you know, then work to restore some of the natives as well.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Hannah, nice job, ladies.
Do you want these back? Do you have more meetings? Do
We
you
need
have more
one for the-
meetings?
we do
Yeah.
need one.
Yeah, we do need one for. Do you want these back?
I want to say one for the
Do you
CPC.
want to keep those for your office and then
Yep,
if
that'd be
folks come
great.
in?
Well,
Yeah,
she'll
that's
keep those,
excellent,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's Mike's.
I just know they're expensive. Meeting.
Maury, give
I
me
just
yours. I'll
wanna
give them to
give it
Alex
CPC,
so
that
she
way
can
I
have them
put
on
it
file.
record. All right, next up is the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club, discussion on the future of Farley Bog.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I'll take this. Thank you.
Yeah, they do. They're under a different layer.
Dan, it's the space bar.
You know, they have.
I would push them.
Thank you. They can have an all-man camp here.
Thank you.
We have a little-
They have these out from Monday night.
And that's
we have to
good.
go Monday.
It's a great one.
I go to the gym all the time. Yeah, my son's in there. He's gonna invite me. We have to be invited. It's like the golf club. If you remember, you get to that.
Thank you, sorry. Closed all the way out. So I don't know if I could have navigated that.
I was doing a file. I thought she loaded everything. There you go.
That's strange. Slideshow. I'll find out. From the beginning all the way to the left.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak with you tonight. I'm Gary Anderson from Precinct 7. I'm the treasurer of the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club and also president of Sporting Safety, Conservation, and Education Fund of Falmouth, which is an IRS-approved nonprofit organization. Now, that name's a real mouthful, so we call it by its acronym, CEF. And CEF is doing business as the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club's charitable foundation. And my lovely assistant here is Dan Murphy, who is the president of the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club. I've given you a background sheet on both organizations, so I'm not going to take up the board's time telling you about us. Tonight, we want to brief you on a proposal we are working on to rehabilitate and restore two key environmental assets in the towns of Falmouth and Mashpee. I have to say, I have to give my sympathies to Chairman Russ Robbins and to Concom Administrator Jen McKay. This is going to be the third time that they've seen this, so, and there are some of you here who viewed it on another occasion, so it'll be a second time for you, but please bear with me and thank you for your patience. The first part of the proposal is to create a cold water fishery to foster the return of native fish to the Upper Childs River, and second, we're proposing a restoration of the Farley Bog to wetlands. This is a high-level view of what we will discuss, and to orient you, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, that's Mashpee Commons, and this is Route 28 heading into Falmouth. This is Carriage Shop Road, which goes across a little causeway. Right here is the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club. Here's where the Farley Bog is. You access the Farley Bog on this little road. It's called Milford Road. It's a road that's a dirt road owned by and maintained by the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club. The town of Falmouth owns the southern portion of the Farley Bog, which in total is 12 acres. The Mashpee town line runs right across the northern tip of the Farley Bog and then heads north up to here. Mashpee owns that portion of the Farley Bog. As this road continues north, you come upon the Garner Bogs, which are also owned by the town of Mashpee. This road then becomes Brown's Road, which is owned by the town of Mashpee, and it ends up at Old Barnstable Road. Now, the source of the Childs River springs from some natural springs up here. This is John's Pond. You can just see the very southern tip of it. The Childs River then flows south through the Garner Bogs, down through the middle of the Farley Bog, under Carriage Shop Road, under Barrows Road, and under Route 28, and then out to Vineyard Sound. It's all one ecological system from John's Pond all the way down to Vineyard Sound, with the Farley Bog being a key point of connectivity. Herring and brook trout used to traverse the Childs River to spawn up in John's Pond. Today, not so much. It's too warm and too shallow. The Farley Bog is completely surrounded by land owned by the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club. This parcel in white are in Falmouth. This parcel is kind of grayish, and this parcel are in Mashpee. This line actually goes down to the Mashpee town line there, so Falmouth owns that. So we literally surround the Farley Bog with our land. Now the parcels, the club has recorded conservation restrictions on all of the parcels, so they'll never be developed. Previously, the Farley and the Garner Bogs were farmed for cranberries. In March 2014, the last cranberry farmer notified the boards of selectmen of both Falmouth and Mashpee that he was going to abandon his leases on these bogs. He stated that cranberry farming was just not economical for him. The boards of selectmen have turned over these bogs, abandoned bogs, to the town conservation commissions for administration. Our understanding is it's highly unlikely that another attempt will be made by either town to put out a request for proposal for cranberry farming on the Farley or the Garner Bogs. So what's going to happen to the Farley Bog? Here are some pictures of the lower Quashnet River area. The picture on the top left was taken in 1953 near Martin Road in Falmouth, when the space around the lower Quashnet River was a cranberry bog. The Quashnet Bog was abandoned about a year after this picture was taken. The picture on the top right is taken from exactly the same position in 1983, 30 years later. It's hardly recognizable as the same spot. Our concern is that the Farley Bog will go feral, just like the picture of the abandoned Quashnet Bog on the lower left-hand corner. The only way to remove the uncontrolled growth of those invasive species that took over that bog was tearing it out yard by hand. It's taken many years of hard restoration work by Falmouth resident Fran Smith and other local conservationists to restore the Quashnet River area. You can see Fran here at a much younger age, and you can see Fran here as he is now. Much more handsome, I'm telling you. Fran is a life member of the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club, and we're very fortunate to have him as a member of our Farley Bog Restoration Committee. His extensive river and bog restoration expertise will be extremely valuable for this project. Fran said that he has worked for 40 years on the Quashnet Bog in one way or another. He started when he was age 9. We have a window of opportunity now to fix the Farley Bog in a controlled way before it goes feral. This project that we are proposing could be a huge cost savings to both towns. And Falmouth and Mashpee could end up with a great bog restoration story. It could be an example statewide. The slide on the bottom right, a trout from the restored Quashnet River, is one of the results we seek. Tonight's an informational update for the Falmouth Conservation Commission Board. Monday, we met with the Falmouth Board of Selectmen. Tomorrow night, we will meet with the Mashpee Concom Board. And on Monday, March 14th, we will make this presentation to the Mashpee Board of Selectmen. We're here to first suggest what the towns can do to bring this proposal to fruition. Second, to answer your questions. And third, to obtain your endorsement of the concept. Here's our proposal. The Falmouth Rod and Gun Club and CEF, in conjunction with local, state, and federal government partners, would undertake the realignment of a portion of the Upper Childs River to create a cold water fishery. We would also move forward with the restoration of the Farley Bog back to natural wetland habitat for waterfowl and other birds and mammals. We've already gained interest and support for our proposal from the Massachusetts State Fisheries, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, representatives from the Wuquoit Bay National Estuarian Research Reserve, or WEBNR, and the Mashpee National Wildlife Refuge. Now, this is an aerial photo of the Farley Bog showing the Childs River running not quite through the middle, but almost. There's a road encircling the entire bog, and there's an existing settling pond on the north end. Here's a drawing of what the Farley Bog might look like upon completion of this project. Please bear in mind that this drawing is not to scale. We propose rerouting the Childs River from the middle of the Farley Bog to the west side of the bog. Along here on the west side is steeply sloping, wooded, hilly terrain. That would provide some shade for from the west side, which will lower the temperature of the river. This is, again, not to scale, but this is an embankment that we would propose that we would create. It would be about 3 to 4 feet high and extend out for 15 to maybe 20 feet. And this would help to cool the river from the east side. And it would also, if we plant it with native grasses and bushes, it would help to prevent any sediment runoff, and it would make for a gentle vegetation transition into the rest of the bog. We would alter the footprint. This is the settling pond right up here, this little red area. We would alter the footprint of this pond. We'd create a new pond on the southern end. We would build a couple of footbridges, one on the north end, one on the south end, to cross the Childs River for hikers. The road encircling the pond, which currently goes all the way around, would be removed and planted with native species. This would discourage bikers, the dirt bikers and four-wheelers, which are currently a pretty big problem out at the bog. The rest of the bog would be restored to wetlands and would be planted with native trees and vegetation which do well in a wet environment, such as Atlantic white cedar, red maple, black gum, and blueberry. Achievement of these two objectives would provide nesting areas for waterfowl and songbirds, as well as habitat for other animals. Realigning the Childs River would help cool the river and foster the migration and propagation of native herring and brook trout. Restoring the Farley Bog to wetland would reestablish a natural water filtering area for our precious water resources. The Rod and Gun Club has always allowed and would continue to allow the public access to its significant acres of land for hiking and interaction with nature. This project, while enhancing those recreational activities, would also create educational opportunities for school field trips and scouts to observe nature and learn about ecology and the waterfowl habitat of a restored wetland. A final benefit to the towns of Falmouth and Mashpee would be to shift the responsibility and the expense for administering an abandoned bog to two organizations which have land and water conservation as core elements of their mission. The Rod and Gun Club and CEF have formed a committee of its members and State Representative David Vieira. About a year ago, this committee met with and proposed its ideas to representatives of the Falmouth and Mashpee Boards of Selectmen and CONCOM, as well as other state and federal officials. Selectman Susan Moran, CONCOM Administrator Jen McKay, CONCOM member Betsy Gladfelder, and Tom Corriveau, the then chair of CONCOM, attended that meeting. Our initial proposal was met with overwhelming support and enthusiasm. Current Chairman Russ Robbins, Mark Kasperzik, Alex Brandt have also seen this presentation earlier this month. This slide shows Maggie Payne, who is a resource soil scientist with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and one of her colleagues pulling a, I don't know if you can see this, but this is a ground penetrating radar sled that they pulled across the Farley Bog. Now the technology allowed them to create a topographical map of the Farley Bog. One thing I'd point out to the board in this picture that was taken nearly a year ago shows the beginning stages of the Farley Bog going feral. You'll see brush and even trees that are beginning to grow out in the bog. This indicates that there's a real sense of urgency to begin the restoration process. You have a copy of this in the handout that I gave you. This is the topographical map that was created by the ground penetrating radar sled. It shows the depth at which a hard sand bottom lies. The little circles that you can just barely see here as they go across the bog is where the sled was dragged. The little circles change color as you get closer, and that would indicate the depth of the hard sand bottom. Now the sled was set to record depths up to 14 feet. And you can see that in the middle of the bog there are no circles, and that indicates that the hard sand bottom is at least 15 to 20 feet below. As you see these lines, the topographical lines, as you head toward the middle of the bog, each one of these lines indicates about a 2-foot increase in depth to the hard sand bottom. Generally, the soil composition above that hard sand bottom contains peat. Now, critical discovery of these ground-penetrating radar results shows that the bog, which is an ancient glacial kettle pond, could support the weight of an embankment on this side, because the hard sand bottom is only 1 to 2 feet on this side. Why is all this important? Well, a recent experience elsewhere on the Cape of building a berm on top of peat had the unfortunate result of the berm disappearing. It sank into the bog, and it caused the river that was being burned to actually rise up and flood the rest of the bog. In my understanding, it's going to cost about $800,000 to $1 million to remove that sunken bog now. Big numbers. Here are some of the steps we must take to rehabilitate the Childs River and restore the Farley Bog. First, we would ask for both towns to transfer responsibility for the Farley Bog to the Rod and Gun Club. Next, we'd develop a project plan with timelines and cost estimates, and we'd identify grant opportunities. We'd apply for permits from regulatory bodies and perform engineering and soil testing where needed, and then we'd begin construction and restoration. Next would be phase 2, which would be to extend the project to the Garner Bogs in Mashpee. A key consideration of this proposal is the control of and responsibility for the Farley Bog parcel. This project will require a substantial financial investment, as well as significant hours of labor by Rod and Gun Club and CEF members. We propose two alternatives. Option one is to have the towns of Falmouth and Mashpee declare the 12-acre Farley Bog parcel surplus municipal land to be acquired by the Rod and Gun Club. Option two is to offer the club a long-term lease on the Farley Bog. Now, if the Rod and Gun Club acquired the land, it would agree to put a conservation restriction on that entire Farley Bog property, as it has done with all of its abutting acreage surrounding the Farley Bog. This conservation restriction would be in each town's CONCOM, the name of the town CONCOM, and would ensure that the Farley Bog would be preserved in perpetuity in its natural state. In conclusion, we are asking that the Falmouth Conservation Commission Board look favorably on our proposal to rehabilitate and restore two key environmental assets, the Upper Childs River and the Farley Bog. Now, we know there are many steps and much complexity with a project like this, particularly when it involves two municipalities. In spite of that, we believe it's a very worthwhile effort, and it will benefit fish, wildlife, and the land and water resources in both communities. The next step we ask for is a vote of the board authorizing us to move forward to determine if the concept is viable. We're asking that the Conservation Commission Board and the Board of Selectmen from each town select a representative to meet with council from each town, along with Representative David Vieira and myself, to determine a means to transfer responsibility for the Farley Bog to the Rod and Gun Club. This subcommittee would then report back to each board for a subsequent recommendation on the project. Thank you, and we're happy to answer any questions from the board, and we look forward to your endorsement of this project.
Thanks, Gary. Comments, questions? Mike?
I like it.
Me too.
Thank you.
Lauren?
Same.
Kristen, you good? Courtney?
I'll hold off on a question for a second.
Betsy? Mary?
It's an appealing proposal.
Jamie? Good?
Should we have a motion for an endorsement?
Yes, please.
Then I'll, Susan, make a motion to endorse the concept of the project, and then we move forward.
Second.
Second, Mary. Any comments from the public? Mary? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for the vote to endorse the concept. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved.
May I ask for the appointment of a representative from the CONCOM to be on this subcommittee?
Sure. Betsy, did I hear you were interested?
I'd love to be on
Okay,
the
so,
subcommittee.
And we would welcome it.
so Betsy Gladfelder, do I need to make a motion on that? No, it's okay. You're in,
But
Betsy.
the deal, Gary, is you have to leave your marking pen with me,
Can we negotiate?
and I'll get it to you tomorrow.
Of course.
You can just leave it with Jen.
Okay,
So you
perfect.
got that, Susan, right? That Betsy's gonna be
All
a
right,
rep.
thanks a
Gary, I
lot.
won't be in tomorrow, so we'll put it in Alex's control.
Alex is responsible.
I'm going to use it
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very
Have a good night. Okay, next up is the Brivogel Restoration Plan, Alex Brandt and Jack Sider.
Not a work. You just press that button. Don't turn it towards us. Cool.
Slideshow, Jeff. From the beginning, there we go.
Good evening, I'm Alexandra Brandt. I work with the town as a land management technician.
And I'm Jack Sidar. I'm the stewardship coordinator with the 300 committee. and we're here tonight to give a brief overview of a project we've been working on at the Brybogle Conservation Area, in which we hope to establish 5 vernal pools. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Brybogle Conservation Area, it's a 67-acre Concom-owned parcel off of Blacksmith Shop Road. It was sold to the town in 2003, and the 300 committee owns a conservation restriction on it. The parcel is comprised of some pitch pine oak uplands, as well as 2 man-made ponds that resemble coastal pond habitat. But the majority of the parcel, as you can see, is an old sand mine. So what we're hoping to do is restore part of the lower sand mine to create some vernal pools.
This is a picture of the sand mine. The ponds in the area that you just saw are back here. So this is standing up. There's quite a big dip down into this area that we are hopefully going to restore into vernal pools.
So this particular area is a depression that Carl Brybogle, before he sold property to the town, began to excavate, and his goal was to create vernal pools. But he realized while he was excavating that if he created a wetland, it would sort of negate the bargain sale that he had arranged with the town. So he stopped digging, but luckily got close enough to the groundwater that we've sort of been able to pick up where he left off and hope to tap into the groundwater, which is typically only 2 or 3 feet below this depression, to create the vernal pools.
So the goals of this project are to build vernal pools for habitat. The main species, well, not the main, but one of the species that we're particularly targeting is the eastern spadefoot toad, which is a threatened species in Massachusetts. We would increase wildlife viewing areas, control erosion. It's overrun right now by Phragmites in this specific area, so we'd be looking to restore it with some native species, and the whole area would be a bit more aesthetically pleasing than it currently is.
So about a year ago now, we went over to Brybogle and set up 5 monitoring wells so that we could measure the average depth to groundwater over the course of the year. So once we did that, we were able to find a different range so that in the spring, the target areas, we can target in 5.
We'll know how far down to dig, to excavate out. We'll know how much sand we need to move, because we'll know, in April last year, the water in the middle there was basically even with the ground. So in that spot, we're not gonna have to move a lot, but the whole area that we're doing, it's about, and how many acres?
So the depression is about 2 acres, and so we're gonna try to restore about half of that to vernal pools.
So over that acre that we're gonna be moving the sand, some spaces, as we could tell with our monitoring wells, we're going to need to move, say, like 2 feet down to be able to get water. And then in other spots, not as much, which we've been able to monitor over the past year. This is showing some of the numbers that we had. It's in inches below the surface. So you can see in April, one of them, the water was right at the surface, and then it got deeper as the year went on.
We ended up taking this data and passing it along to Tom Biebenhauser, who's a wetland restoration specialist. He worked on a proposal with Ian Ives using this data to create the actual table that you'll see in the next slide, which shows how much gravel is going to be removed and gives us better cost predictors and time predictors for the project.
As you can see on the right, that is how we monitored it. We had PVC pipes that we drilled some holes in and put some window screen, duct taped it around it, so it kept out the sand. and then we were able to use a dipstick and tell how far down the water was. I think in each one, we dug them down like 3 feet, tried to. Sometimes it's hard in sand to get that far with a posthole digger, but.
So this is the wetland establishment table that Tom Beebinghauser came up with. It shows basically the average depth for each vernal pool, the center of each vernal pool, the rough estimate of size, as well as the water depth, the average water depth from the wells, and excavator hours and dozer hours to move all the cubic sand.
It shows it better. This is so we went out to the site and we flagged out each vernal pool where it would be working with the landscape that was out there. So from above, it looks kind of weird, but we GPSed each of our flags and we came up with the 5 sections that would be pools. The green triangles are where we had our test wells, so we know how deep the groundwater levels are there. And then the purple area is currently
It's an eroding channel. So basically,
Yeah.
the upland has a hard pan under it so that during this mining operation, trucks could come in and haul it out. And so what's happening is that during heavy rain events, a lot of the water is sheeting off of the upland and coming down this channel and washing sand sort of into that area. You can see a washout there. So to help negate that, we're going to expand the channel, which will reduce the shear stress during any given rain event and hopefully stop the erosion from coming into the vernal pool project.
When Carl left the property, he had a berm right there, you can see it, which was ripped through by dirt bikes. So had dirt bikers not been on the site, most likely this wouldn't be an issue, like this area, but it's a problem that we're hopefully going to be tackling with this, maybe with the awareness that we are trying to enhance wildlife habitat. We have species that we're going to be head starting here. If we can get it out there that this is an area that I know it's very attractive to dirt bike here. It's ideal. It's a sand mine. It's perfect for them, but we would like to increase the ecological function, so to speak, of this parcel. So if anyone's listening, please stop dirt biking there. Go ahead.
So this is a picture of the eroding channel from the sand plain, and as you can see, it's at the deepest, probably 4 or 5 feet, sort of as you get closer to the vernal pool project area. So the goal with this is to sort of spread this channel out, as we mentioned, so that the water runoff will be a lot slower. And eventually, we'd like to regrade the upland, first by starting to remove the hard pan underneath it, and then regrading it so that the water actually runs back towards the middle and away from the vernal pools. So this is a picture of the eastern spadefoot toad, which is the primary target species for the project. The goal is to, as Alex mentioned, have 5 pools with varying depths, so that any given year, hopefully one of those pools will be within the range of the spadefoot toad, which likes unusually shallow vernal pools that dry up very quickly. The sand in the area is very appealing as well. A lot of spadefoot toads are found on Sandy Neck Beach. That's one of the strongest populations in the state. And basically their life cycle is that they spend the majority of it underground, and they'll come out for maybe 6 to 9 weeks, I believe, in the spring, depending on when it rains, to mate in very shallow vernal pools, and then burrow back underground. So this, as you can see, Alex was talking about earlier, but ATVs and dirt bikes are a big issue on the property. So we're hoping that by establishing a presence on this property, that it will deter dirt bikers once they know that it's not just a vacant sand pit anymore. We're going to add some informational signage, hopefully a fence or 2 to keep them out. And once we establish a population and students hopefully We're working with Falmouth Academy to engage some student activities out there, so we're hoping that a stronger presence out on the property will also help to deter dirt bikers.
Engaging volunteers, so as Jack mentioned with students, we are hoping to work with Ian Ives from Mass Audubon to head start the toads in classrooms as tadpoles, and have the kids grow them, and then have them release it, and have them be actively a part of this so that we're engaging the community and they start to feel ownership over their town's lands. This picture is of one of the ponds that's already there. As I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of Phragmites, so we are going to be hopefully getting a lot of help from our loving volunteers to remove some of the Phragmites that's there, because we do not want it blowing into our created wetlands and then taking over. So we're going to be actively on top of that throughout this process. And that's
the end of the presentation.
Excellent job, you two. Very good. Very good. Any questions or comments?
Mr.
Jen?
Chairman, I just wanted to say I know the 300 committee has for a while wanted to begin the restoration of this site, so Alex and Jack have done a great job bringing the project to this point, and we'll be looking at our available funding. We're researching that right now for the project, and then following the proper procurement protocols to move it forward in the future. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Very good.
ask us questions. Do you have any?
Any questions?
Are we gonna have any of them in the
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Well, the idea is that there will all be different depths, and we are going to have some that are deeper. So, hopefully, it'd be lovely.
I have a question about the spade-foot toad. How far away from the edges of the pond do they burrow down? Do they go far?
Yeah, they typically spend most of their life sort of in the upland.
Like
And
how
then
far
they'll-
upland?
I don't know the
Well-
exact distance.
50 feet, 100 yards? I mean,
At Ashumet Holly, where they're monitoring for them, they're monitoring, I believe it was about 100 feet from the vernal pool that they had created, that liner wetland. So they are monitoring away, so I don't know exactly.
so it's really
but-
important to keep the dirt bikes out. What I'm saying is that if
Correct.
these little guys, they're not on the edge of the pond, they're
Yeah.
far out, that
Right.
if you're gonna put fencing up or some kind of signage, that it's to
Far
protect
enough
them
away.
underground, which is most of their life.
Yeah.
But it's not that far underground that dirt bikes won't kill them, right?
They can
How
go
far do
down
they
to
go?
8 feet underground.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Little hedgehogs.
Still more,
They-
we're
they-
working with the town right now to get some fencing installed at key points.
Okay, thank you. It was interesting. I think that Ivan.
Ian
Ian
Ives.
Ives,
Ian
yeah,
Ives,
yeah,
He
you
came here with a couple
Yeah.
of years ago, didn't he, or
Yeah.
last year or
Yeah.
something? Yeah, okay.
It's been a
It
good
was very
resource for the
interesting.
project as well.
Yeah, we hope to have a lot of signage, but not enough to deter from, we don't want it to be plastered with it, but we want to make people aware of what's on the site. We have plans to have a kiosk kind of at the front, just so that people can see, but the dirt bikers probably aren't going through the front, but we'll address that.
They're not going through the nice entrance that's there now?
Well, they might be,
The
because
parking area and the
until our
path?
fence is up, they might be, so.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, I was going to ask you to elaborate on your ideas about fencing, because at the risk of sounding defeatist, I think the dirt bikers are gonna be
Right.
an eternal problem.
So we've been looking at the main access points that they're going in through, and some of them can be deterred because of the terrain. At Cardoza, there's fencing where it's a chain attached to 2 posts, and on that chain is like a pipe. So it can be accessed if you need to, but it's locked, and there's nowhere to really like cut it or mess with it. We've been looking at that style. We've been open to any suggestions or ideas. We've been talking to other towns, seeing what works, what doesn't. It seems to be a problem kind of everywhere. But we're hoping a greater presence, and if we have to fence off the lower vernal pool area, we can. That might be something that we have to do, so we're aware of that.
We're aware of the challenges, Mary.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else? Mike?
Excuse me, great project. USGS retained records on a large number of observation wells right in Falmouth. If you take a look at those hysterical is probably the word, historical records, you can get a sense of how the water table fluctuated at your site over that period as opposed to the long-term average. So if you had a relatively short 1 year cycle, so that if it was an exceptionally wet or dry year, your records may not be representative of long-term conditions.
Yeah.
So if you go to USGS, they'll give you the wells. You can get the data, I believe, is online. You can just take a look at it and be as sophisticated as you are not. There are actually statistical methods that say this is the data set for the entire area, or this is your location. The seasonal high wouldn't typically be.
Yeah,
Or
that's
just
great.
eyeball it. But I mean, at least do something and build on that one set of data, that limited frame you have, time frame.
We do have more than that. That was
That's
just
good.
what we had submitted
Okay, that's
for
good.
Tom
That's
Meeting
good.
House. We
That's-
do have some more months, and we are still actively
I don't
doing-
know that much about plants, but groundwater I do.
Great.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Anything else?
From the
Oh, anyone from the public?
I was just wondering how,
Linda, you're gonna have to go to the, you know the drill.
okay, let me just say, this is a fabulous project. I just looked up the toads. They go like in a space no bigger than this room is where you can find the same toad for 5 years running. So you got a shot at this one because they don't move very far. What I was wondering is how far out from the edge of the pond are you going to plant vegetation? Because that might be sufficient. You know, get enough pitch pines growing. You'll keep the dirt bikers away from the edge of the pond.
So we actually were not, in this proposal, we weren't going to plant. We were going to hopefully let it naturally revegetate with the seed beds that are there, just for cost-wise. But having large machinery down there and wanting to clear the upland, we might be able to move some of those pines to the edge, and that would be a great idea for the vegetation.
Still the living fence.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else from the public?
Yeah, I have a question. When was that Phragmites picture taken?
Ooh, years ago. That was with a working group that Dick Payne.
Well, I might have
believe,
been in
put
that
Yeah,
picture.
I think you might have been.
So I thought it might have been recently, and I was gonna say,
No, that was,
that looks as bad as when we were there, and
No,
what we did.
It looks much better, actually, still today.
Oh, well-
It looks good, you can tell that it's been.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, that's it.
Great project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, request for installation of memorial bench. Jack?
yeah, so on behalf of the 300 committee, unfortunately, we lost a very valuable land steward last spring named Mel Miller, who was very active at Peterson Farm. So the 300 committee was hoping to install a memorial bench at Peterson Farm in his honor, and with the help of placement from staff of the Conservation Commission, we're asking permission to install that bench hopefully sometime this summer.
Jen?
I recommend the board approve that, and they can work, 300 committee can work with our staff to pick a proper location.
Okay,
So moved. Second.
so we got a motion by Mary, second by Betsy. Only because you remember right ear, a good ear. You get that, okay.
And you remembered my name.
Yep. Okay, any other comments on this? Okay.
Thank you.
Comments
Maybe
and
a
questions?
racket, Jack. We normally find ways to harass people.
Questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved. Okay, Coonamessett Fields, history of the reservation parcel and the plans for grassland management through prescribed burns. I think this is Mark.
Mark and Jack.
No.
It's not quite in focus. Could you focus?
Well, the writing is.
Oh, that's true. Maybe the picture's in focus.
So this is another update on a project that the 300 Committee and the Conservation Commission have been working on. This one's up at the Coonamessett Reservation, and it will be on improving the sand plain grassland that's up there. So the Coonamessett Reservation is located off of 151. It's 39 acres. This particular parcel that we're referring to was also known as the Polo Field. And as you can see in the aerial, there's about 10 acres of grassland right now. And so the plan for this project is to expand upon the existing grassland and create some larger grassland fields for birds, butterflies, and other wildlife. This is a picture from 2006 of some little blue stem. This is a sand plain grassland species, which is a very globally rare habitat, but it's actually established fairly well up at the Coonamessett Reservation. Slide. So when the property was acquired, it was mostly agricultural grasses. You can see here a tractor actually in what looks like a bale of hay. So since then, there's a couple more pictures if you want it. More agricultural. And then so now what's happened is that that small little patch of little blue stem, with the help of a lot of work on the property removing invasives, has begun to establish itself. So we're hoping to continue to promote this grassland in different management tactics. So the goal of this project is to promote grassland birds and different plant species in the area. It's going to help control non-native plants. Different varieties of invasive species have started to creep in. And we're looking to convert some of the additional woodland and shrubs that have begun to creep in and close out the grassland. We're trying to push those back. So the grassland birds that we're trying to promote are the American kestrel, the bobolink, basically any sort of grassland bird that might be found up there, different grassland bird species, typically that aren't found on a property as small as the Coonamessett Reservation, have been seen there because it's linked over to the Crane Wildlife Management Area. And so, whereas this relatively small field by itself wouldn't necessarily be all that valuable, it has added value because of its proximity to the Crane Wildlife Management Area. We're also hoping to control invasive species. There's oriental bittersweet, black swallowwort, some autumn olive, various types of nasty invasives up there that we're trying to suppress and get rid of. So this is a map of basically the two fields. The top part, number 1, is basically the existing field. We use volunteers to help us maintain that. Thank you, Bessie. Through mowing primarily. And then the second spot, number 2, we're looking to sort of push the field into that area. And actually this fall, Conservation Commission, with the help of DPW, was able to pull out a bunch of asphalt and other, some sort of structured debris down in that area so that we can start to continue to mow into that area. One of the recommended actions that was approved in the original management plan that we haven't been able to do for a while is a prescribed fire. Prescribed fire is very helpful in not only promoting native grassland species, but eradicating invasives. And recently, with the help of a MOU with the Mashpee National Wildlife Refuge, we've been given some access into their fire management teams, their tools, and their crews. And so this past spring, Mark and I went out and met with Tim Simmons, who was willing to throw the Coonamessett Reservation onto their burn plan for Crane Wildlife Management Area. So we're hoping that this spring we'll actually be able to hopefully get our first burn in there in quite a while, if ever. First time. And so the burn plan is broken up into two sections. The top one is about an 11-acre field, 10-acre field, and then section 2 is roughly the same size, about 2 acres, about 10 acres. And the goal is that on any given year, you're burning half of one of those sections. So it would be about a 5-acre burn. That way you sort of have a nice rotation where you're letting some of the grassland stay and some of it burn off so that species can rotate and still have enough food and forage. We're also hoping to get rid of some of these hedges. So as grassland bird species come into an area, they sort of see the bird's eye view like this, and if they see these closed off areas, they're not as inclined to go there. So by strategically removing some of the tree lines and hedgerows, you can make a smaller area look much more appealing to a lot of these grassland bird species. Mark, is there anything else that you would like to add?
The only thing I want to say, I'm Mark Kasperzik, Falmouth Conservation Commission agent. It has been a long process. A lot of you, some people in the audience, have been trying to get this burn done since 2002. Back in 2002, there were autumn olive trees all through the field. They had been pulled out by, in some cases, horses, and we had help from a lot of the local landscapers in getting the field opened up. And literally 2 years after we did that, we had this grasshopper sparrow, one of the rare species for the state, nest there. So it does work, and over those years, we've been mowing the fields, twice a year, then it went down to once a year, and then we're lucky to do it once a year now. So this is an incredible effort, though, by having this memorandum of understanding that you guys have signed last fall, we now can piggyback, like Jack was saying, with Fish and Wildlife. And our primary contact now is Dan Fortier over there, who actually just sent an email today saying that they are going to, hopefully at the end of this week or next week, mow sort of around the first burn area, which would be half of what, the western half of that section 1 that you saw. So it's looking good.
All right. Comments or questions? Jen?
I just want to let the commission know that Mark has attended, monthly meetings with the Mashpee Wildlife Refuge?
Well, no.
Quarterly.
3 or 4 months.
Quarterly meetings, and has, really given Falmouth a presence on that committee and has done a lot of work to get that MOU before you and the Board of Selectmen.
Very good. You've got some good staff, I'll tell you.
Yes.
Great job. Any other comments, questions?
Just so nice to see that field. I remember back in the 90s when it was all Russian olive mostly. So it's nice to see it eradicated. Good job.
Yes, sir. You're going to come up to the...
Good evening, I'm Day Mount. I'm just entering my 14th year on the board of the 300 Committee and also as chairman of the Stewardship Committee. And I want to take this opportunity to thank this board and the staff for the excellent cooperation. These management projects that have been things that we've all wanted to do for a long time. It's just very exciting to see it happening. I credit the people involved and the staff, these young people, Mark, and just wanted to thank you very much. It's really fun to see us being able to accomplish these things.
Great to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's fun to do these.
Yeah, it is. I think I might have mentioned this to you before, Mark, is to get the public information out there, maybe do something in the enterprise just prior to when you start. It might,
Right.
you know, eliminate a lot of calls to town
Yes,
hall, that
right.
type of thing, you know what I mean?
We have, we're gonna mail out, to all the letters too.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
Maybe
And
it's
and like I
village
say, even an article in
associations.
the Enterprise, maybe talk to one of the boards. and-
That's the guarantee. Dan Fortier says this is part of their requirements. They put something in the newspaper, you know, we'll certainly, would like to get some articles out there too.
That would be great.
Like, we will be notifying you about it.
Cool.
Maybe you can announce it at town meeting.
Or not.
No, that's probably a good idea.
That is a good idea, Maury. Yeah?
Because they'll probably have that before you burn, right?
Alex, you did such a good job, you can stay for mine.
Okay, excellent job, you guys, really.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up is the Coonamessett River Restoration Update. Elizabeth Gladfelder, PhD.
I was having fun with that.
Whose idea was that?
Jen, I don't write these.
I didn't write that either. Jen did that.
I was feeling playful that day.
Betsy, where is it?
Go up,
Go up.
maybe up, other
other-
scroll bar, there we go. Well, maybe not that far up. Go back down, slowly.
There it is, Concom presentation.
Older presenters. Oh, I mean, presentations. Sorry.
Slideshow, Alex. There we go.
Okay, thank you. So this is another project that many of you in the room have remembered and thought about for many years. There are two parts of it I'm going to talk about today. One is the Coonamessett River restoration, and as part of that project, we're also doing a Coonamessett Greenway Heritage Trail. And I might say that Jack and Alex have been very instrumental in both projects, but especially the second project. Okay, so here's the area that we were just talking about for the prescribed burn. Here's our northern border, and the Coonamessett corridor goes all the way down to Vineyard Sound. Thanks to the 300 Committee, who has this vision of a Coonamessett Greenway, they have added to conservation lands that are under the management of the Conservation Commission, and strategically bought land along the Coonamessett River to provide buffers. And everybody on this board knows how important buffers are to maintain the integrity of wetlands. If we go in a little closer, the Heritage Trail is going to run from the Sousa property, or currently, eventually would like it the whole way, and actually Alex has some water parts to it. So it'll be hiking, kayaking, to get the whole way. But the trail that we're working on right now will go from the Sousa property to the area of the present Lower Bog Dam. Okay, Coonamessett River restoration has been, the restoration of the Coonamessett for improved fish passage has been a goal of the Conservation Commission and many people in town for many years. We began working actively on this, and by actively, actually getting funding in about 2010. And with funding, you also often have to target your grants to what the funding agency is looking for. And the first funding we got was a grant that wanted to improve fish passage through problematic barriers. And the Coonamessett River Working Group had put together a management plan to restore fish passage in the river, and they had mapped all the barriers along the river, and there was something like 26. And of those, and fish could get through all of them, but there were 4 that caused a considerable effort on the part of the fishes to get through. And those were the Lower Bog Dam, the middle, the berm between Lower Bog and Middle Bog, the culvert under John Parker Road, and then I'll just call this the Pond 14 complex. And I'm just going to briefly mention about that. The Pond 14 complex, there are two issues. One issue is there's a fish ladder here that's difficult for the fishes to get up. And the other issue is there is a stream, a bypass channel that brings what is cold water at this part of the river past the pond and back into the river again. But most of the water goes through Pond 14, and this is a very shallow pond. It's a former cranberry bog, and in the summer that heats up a lot, and it makes it especially difficult for trout to live in. I mean, the trout just can't survive. Next. Okay, just to show you sort of, it would be nice to go out and get $500,000 to do a project and do it all in a couple of years, but that's also not realistic in a lot of these restoration projects. Prior to, from 2004 to the present, the Coonamessett River Trust, which is a not-for-profit group, many of whose members are here tonight, they provided two important services for the town. One is they gathered a significant amount of baseline data on things like water temperature, water flow, chemical and biological data on the river. And they also had periodic work days where, with Gary's project, he mentioned what happens when you abandon a bog, and it quickly goes to invasives. And so they would work several days during the summer work days and remove some of the invasive plants. Okay, that first grant was the Fish America Foundation NOAA grant, and the result of that was we hired a river restoration specialist, engineer, and he provided, Nick Nelson, he provided the Coonamessett Alternatives Report, which, I don't know, I can't remember how many of you were on the board when Nick presented that first, but we went through each of the four barriers, and he had several alternatives, and we discussed in a public session, we discussed the various options and made recommendations on which were most appropriate. And then we went back and said, well, what should we tackle first? And also at the same time, again, thanks to the Coonamessett River Trust, having us from, I believe, around 2004 or 2005, part of the Riffles program, which is part of the Division of Ecological Restoration. That enabled us to qualify as a priority river. And around this time, I contacted some of the people from DER and said, well, what do we do to get you actively involved? And they said, you ask us. And so they have been actively involved and have been putting about $30,000 a year into the lower bog restoration process. Then Massachusetts Environmental Trust awarded us a $55,000 grant in 2013, which enabled us, along with the money from the Division of Ecological Restoration and in-kind support from the volunteers and also the town of Falmouth, to have 75% engineering plans. And Nick presented that to the board about a year ago. In 2015, last year, we were awarded another $60,000 grant from MET to care for the next 3 years, which enables us to continue to have Nick follow the project through the construction phase. We've recently obtained the MEPA certificate, and we're in the process of doing permitting. And DER and Interflow, Nick's company, are working on those permitting paperwork for us. We're also applying for NOAA funding for construction funds, which will be somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000. This will be matched again by DPW, who will actually remove the dam for us. And other, this other grant money, and also by other town of Falmouth contributions. During this next phase, we are going to start marching up the river and connecting Lower Bog to Middle Bog. Our goal is in fall of 2017 to remove the dam and basically reroute the river. I'll show you that in a minute. And that work should be completed by 2018. But of course, one of the things that Beth talks about, that she doesn't like this phrase, but other people in her office use it, any restoration project is dependent on Mother Nature and Father Time. But the goal is to get the river restored to a natural river. Next. Okay, just to show you, these are our partners, MET, and I have to say this is one of the conditions of our contract with them. Massachusetts Environmental Trust only has as a source of their money the sale of whale tail, trout, and
Blackstone River?
Yeah, what is it? Blackstone River Mill license plates. Okay, this is Division of Ecological Restoration. Steve Hurley and Brad Chase from Fisheries and Wildlife and Marine Fisheries work with us. Our first grant was NOAA, Fish America, and Jim Turek from the NOAA Restoration Center in Rhode Island works with us. The town of Falmouth, many of the groups in Falmouth have given a trip, sort of above and beyond duty help in this. And in particular, I want to thank Peter McConerty, who's works with me on projects all along. And he has also worked with Ray Jack and John Lyons for us to determine the town of Falmouth contribution during the construction phase. Coonamessett River Trust, and I'll talk a little bit about them. I'll talk about them in a second. Botanical Club of Cape Cod and the Islands, and the 300 Committee has all worked on various aspects of these projects with us. Okay, what are the goals? Well, the goals are to restore the Coonamessett River to be a natural wetland. We want a healthy river ecosystem for the fish populations and other species associated with it. Returning these wetlands back to natural functioning wetlands will help in other ecosystem services, including nitrogen removal into our coastal ponds, and also flood mitigation. If we have a big flood and Great Pond floods, part of the sort of relief valve is for water to go up this river. Recreational benefits. There'll be passive recreation in the area as there is now, but there will be enhanced opportunities. Educational opportunities, and this is for anyone who visits the area, and the goal of our Heritage Trail is to learn about environmental and land use history of Falmouth. And finally, research, and I give us an example leading to new insights on critical stages in the life history of fishes. And I'll talk a little bit at the end about some of the research that's being done. Next. Okay, what are the fishes? There are 5 species of diadromous fish in the Coonamessett. We have 2 species of river herring, the blueback and the alewife, Diadromous means these are species that migrate between saltwater and freshwater habitats during their life cycle. Next, the other three are brook trout, white perch, and the American eel. Next. But lots of other animals use, animals and plants, and other species use the Coonamessett. And these are two pictures I took this summer, and there are a lot of birds that use the corridor, a lot of little predators here, and have come back in areas of abandoned bogs. And this is a insectivorous plant, a sundew, which also occurs in the area. I like insectivorous plants, that's why that's in there. Next. Okay. Beth Lambert, who's our program manager with the Division of Ecological Restoration, will give a presentation on Wednesday, March 23rd, on the principles of river restoration in general, and in specific, discuss how those principles were applied in the design of our restoration project. And next slide will show this area. Okay, here's Middle Bog, but tonight we're going to focus on what we're going to do in the next 2 years in Lower Bog. Next. Okay, this is going to be a very brief explanation. Beth will tell you a lot more about this, but this is the river channel across here and across here as it exists today. When we reroute the river channel, and this is sort of an introduction, we need to get this out into the public. The month that we actually do this work, there's going to be heavy equipment on the bog, and it's going to look pretty bare. Right now, there's been a lot of growth. There are a lot of pines and so forth. But a lot of sand will be removed. We'll get down to the peat area, and all these sticks back and forth are actually big logs and root wads, and they'll be put in the outer part of bends all along the river. And if we focus in on this, next. So here's the river flowing along. As it goes around this bend, it has to rush, has a longer pathway around the outer end than the inner end. And what happens is the water will flow faster, and where is it here? It'll create pools and hiding areas. It'll create deeper parts of the river underneath these areas, and then a shallow part on the inside of the bend. Next. Okay, so Beth is going to present a talk about the river restoration project. Nick Nelson, who's our river engineer, will lead a field trip on the Lower Bog on Saturday, April 2nd from 10 to noon. And this is the Lower Bog Dam. And so anyone who'd like to talk to Nick and look at the river and talk about the restoration process. And I think we'll leave it to Jen to post this as a public hearing so that all the commissioners can come who can make it that day. Okay. Next. Okay, the next, as part of this, all of you are well aware of the fact that the Coonamessett River has a long history, and many people interested in the history of the Coonamessett. And so this summer, I worked with a high school intern and a college intern to map the Coonamessett, map this Greenway Heritage Trail, and also decide where we wanted informational kiosks. And these informational kiosks on one side will have a cultural story, and on the other side will have a land use story. And then at the site of where the dam was, I should have mentioned that when the dam's removed, there'll be a bridge across the river, and there'll be a bridge across the river between lower and middle bogs. At the site of where the lower bog dam was, there was a woolen mill in the 1800s prior to cranberry bogs, and there are a lot of granite blocks that are left there, and we're going to use those granite blocks. There'll be more than just a kiosk. There'll be a amphitheater, educational center, an outdoor educational center that will have benches that people can bring classes, and also you can rest at the end of your walk. It's about 3.5 miles down the river. Next. Okay, there are a lot of groups that will be working with us on these kiosks. There are 3 kiosks already along the trail, but we'll make them all uniform. It'll be like the ones on the bike path. But this is one we're working with Coonamessett Pond Association up by the Sousa, well, this is in the Dupee parcel, Sousa and Dupee parcel up by the pond. There was a large dairy farm there until about the 1930s. And there's a nice history book of the farming in the Coonamessett and then subsequent vacation areas in the Coonamessett Valley by Les Garrick. But the remains of this barn are there, and so there'll be a historical story about what happened at this site and what you can see historically. And then one of the things, when Alex and I were out there, and Jack, we were talking about management of the field. And so, for instance, one of the things on the other side will be, why do we have field habitat? Why do we manage for field habitat? What are our goals, and how do we achieve those goals? Next. Okay, if you keep walking south on the river, you go by an area called Broad River. Next. And eventually, you get to Riverbend, which is a 300 committee property. And these are the kinds of kiosks we're envisioning. And the 300 committee has a plan for it. And Alex is working on labor. So if we get materials for it and we get our storyboards, we'll be much of the way there. So in this case, there's a historic silo, and this is an area where there was a lot of grazing, and there was also a grist mill at this part of the river. And there's a lot of history about that, and I've asked the Botanical Club to prepare a natural history story on this side about sort of natural succession. This is a bog that was abandoned. Does anybody know how long ago this bog was abandoned? But it's naturally revegetated, but interestingly enough, has avoided a lot of invasives. So it's a nice forest through there. And if you go with the right people, you might see a sendu. Next. Okay, and finally, down at Lower Bog, we're talking about our outdoor education amphitheater. And the stories that we'll highlight here will take you all the way down the river, like the geology of this area, so forth. Next. Okay. There are 3 projects that I just want to briefly mention that are occurring on the river. And this is, as you saw with every presentation tonight, I think it's really exciting that Falmouth is at a point where we're trying to restore habitat. The first is Steve Hurley's very successful reintroduction of brook trout. He's brought them from the Mashpee and Quashnet rivers for 3 years and has had very good success, not only survival, but they're producing young in the river. And some of these brook trout are making it down into middle and lower bog, and then eventually going back into the colder water. But eventually, we're hoping to reestablish a salter trout population. So these are trout that are born in freshwater, brook trout born in freshwater, but they go out and feed in Great Pond and in saltwater, and they actually get much bigger. Okay, the next project is with the Botany Club. Pam Poloni was the one who brought this to my attention, and she and I put in an application. And that is the New England Wildflower Society has a big project where they're collecting seeds and seeds of native plants that you want to grow in areas that you're restoring. And so Pam and the Botany Group has a record for the last 10 years. They go out and do a survey on Lower Bog, so they know what plants are there. And the New England Wildflower Society will be working with the Botany Club in collecting seeds so that when we restore Lower Bog, a lot of these seeds can be used as opposed to having to buy seed. And the last is a project that the Coonamessett River Trust started this last year, and it's tracking herring movements during migration. This is a very exciting aspect of fish biology the last, say, 10 years, where you can do fine-scale movements by various kinds of tagging. Next. So the babies are born in the ponds of the Coonamessett Valley, and juveniles go back out, and eventually they go out to sea, and they become mature adults, and then they come back in the river, and then they spawn, and the cycle goes on. So why are these fish important? Well, it's exciting to think that we have these fishes in our rivers, but overall, these diatomeous fish link freshwater and marine ecosystems. So basically, they're transferring material and energy from one system to the other. They're important prey species for predators in both environments, including things like striped bass and birds along the Coonamessett. And they themselves, they're important prey for predators, and they themselves are important predators in the freshwater ponds that and rivers that they pass through. Next. Okay, so here's what the project was. Here's the river from the Coonamessett Pond down through Pond 14 and down through the bogs. Flax Pond is another route that the fish can take. So they could spawn in Flax Pond or the Coonamessett Pond. The river, as our walk, is about 5.5 kilometers in length. There's a long history of herring harvest in the Coonamessett, and there were an order of magnitude or several orders of magnitude more herring back in the past. And in fact, the issue of herring and industrial use of the river goes back several centuries in town. Okay, visual counts, thanks, is Lou still here? Thanks to Lou, have been going on since 2004. And an interesting thing about the visual counts is that the visual counts on the Coonamessett take place in the early evening hours, and a number of people who count herring on the Cape were very insistent that it had to be done during the daytime hours. But the fact is, and you'll see from this study, that's not when herring migrate. And maybe they were forced to switch because for the last 100 years they've had a river that has been very open to predators. It's been shallow and wide. Okay, and one of the questions is, are the fish inhibited in passage by some of these barriers? I mean, that was one of the questions. That was one of the first projects. I mean, that was one of the first grants that we got. Next. Okay, so here we are. Here's Linda tagging, and a number of people helped on this project. I know I know there's a grunt worker here. Charlie Cooper did a lot of work on this. Lou did work on it. And one of the things they did was they tagged about 1% of the fish that went up the river. There were 50 to 70,000 fish that migrated this year. And to raise money for the tags, they had an Adopt a Fish program, which was very successful. And I know they're into the adopting a fish right now. Linda has information for anybody who'd like to adopt a fish. Maybe we as a Conservation Commission can adopt some fish. But another exciting thing that Linda told me yesterday was that Lou has been working with some of the people in the public schools, and 5 of the public schools have classrooms that are going to be adopting fish. And six of the schools. I think he's trying to work on all 8. And I'm sure if you talk to Linda or Lou or Charlie, Chris is not catching my eye, they could help you if you want to be part of this program. Next. So basically they put these little tags, these little acoustic tags on the fishes, and they tagged them here in Lower Bog. And then at Middle Bog, they had sort of listening devices below at the culvert bottom, the culvert top, culvert south, culvert north, and above, just above the barrier between Lower and Middle Bog. And then they had a listening device here at Flax Pond and at Coonamessett Pond. Next. Okay, so what happened? So if this were your fish, this is what you would learn about it. It arrived probably around May 2nd and was in Lower Bog for a couple of days, and then it made it through all the way up to Coonamessett Pond in a day, and then stayed there for a couple of weeks, and then it successfully made it all the way out again. Next. But what else did we learn? Some of the fishes that were tagged got tagged themselves by predators, which include gulls and ospreys and otters and other things that like to eat herring. Next. Okay, a few of the fish tagged, and both species were tagged, about 10% of blueback and 90% of, isn't that right? About 10 and 90% of river herring, of alewives. Here's a fish that went up, made it up in a day to Coonamessett Pond, hung out for a couple of weeks there, but came back via Pond 14 and Flax Pond for a day or 2, and then left the system. Next. But one of the really critical aspects of this program is not only did we learn how long it takes fishes to get there and how long they stay in certain areas, but what was a problem? Look what happened to this poor fish. He started at the Lower Bog tag site. He was in the Lower Bog for a day or 2. He got to this culvert between Lower and Middle Bog, and he kind of got stuck. And he ended up back in Lower Bog for a few hours. Then he went up again, but he couldn't make it through. And he came back out again. And then these are hours now, midnight, noon. Went up again, he didn't make it. And then he went up a 3rd time, and he finally made it through, and he made it up to the pond. So modifying or eliminating these critical barriers will make a big difference to the success of these fishes. There's a lot more to be learned about the survival of these fishes. There's some people at Hui, there's some scientists at Hui who are focusing on the success of the larvae that are produced and the question is, how many of them make it back out to sea to complete and then hopefully come back to complete the cycle. Next. Okay, just residency in the watershed was very highly correlated with residency in the ponds, just meaning most of the time they're in the system, they're spending time spawning in the ponds. Next. Okay, what did we find out? Well, many interesting patterns observed. Individuals from each species navigated to each of the ponds in the watershed, suggesting that spawning of the two species may overlap. Movement primarily occurred under the cover of darkness, which Lou and his group had known for years, but it was confirmed again. With periods of movement occurring immediately following sunset and just prior to sunrise. Movement through the river was typically rapid. As I showed you, many of them just covered the stream in a single night. But even small surmountable barriers in the watershed slowed migration and likely increased mortality from predation. Next. Okay, dates for you to remember. March 23rd, Beth is going to give a talk, and April 2nd, Nick Nelson will give a field trip to, and both of them will be discussing the river restoration plans in these presentations. Next. And that's the end of this presentation. Lucky for you, I'm here for a following presentation, but it's going to be very short.
Okay, questions or comments?
Do you want to do a little show and tell?
Sure.
So just so you guys know what we're doing, these are the tags that get implanted in the individual fish. Just pass those down. And the fish, you know, they're about this big, you know what garden look like. And then these are what we call the gates, those antennas that she was talking about. This is the one that goes on Flax Pond, and we put this around.
Linda, I gotta ask you to go.
We put
Thank
this
you.
around the entrance of the pond, so the fish just swim through this. We don't have to touch them or anything. It's a remote, non-invasive kind of thing. The tag triggers this wire that you see here as they swim through here. The wire picks up the tag, and so that's how we can track the 500 fish that we tagged last year, which was the most number of fish that have ever been pit tagged on a herring run in this region ever. So it was the Division of Marine Fisheries was blown away because they have a couple of other grad students working in places that tag like 100, and this group of volunteers to 500. So they're really interested in the work. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know that's what it looks like. It's pretty unobtrusive out there, and we're really excited about the involvement of the school kids. We've had some tags donated that we can give to the school kids so they don't have to purchase them. So that's really going to help with the involvement.
Awesome.
Open to more donations, help schools. Get your tags.
How much are the tags, Linda?
It costs, there's an adoption fee of $12 for one fish, and then there's a discount if you want to adopt a school. A fish.
And fewer, there's a discount if you adopt all 3 fishes.
Yeah.
Yeah, $30. 12 for a fish, 30 for 3. And I'm sure you could probably negotiate if you wanted to adopt 100 fish.
And I should say that the Falmouth DNR has been very helpful with this and has helped us with the installation and purchase some of the initial equipment that we did.
And the Rod and Gun Club.
And the Rod and Gun Club, that's right. Yeah.
Adopted more than 100.
That's great. Anything else? Everybody good? Any more comments from the public? Okay. Thank you very much, Betsy, for that one.
Thank you, Betsy.
Discussion of the proposed Great Thicket National Wildlife Refuge.
No, that's it. You just keep on going where you were. Did you close that presentation? It was the next slide.
Oops.
So open it up again. Go right there. Well, I thought it would make it simpler. I should have told you ahead of time. Okay, the Great Thicket National Wildlife Refuge. I'm presenting this, and I'm presenting it asking for a vote to allow Russ to send a letter in support of this. We just heard earlier, yeah, there he is, about Mark and the Mashpee Wildlife Refuge with which the town has an MOU. And the way these wildlife refuges work is that there's a refuge area, and if you're included in the refuge area, you qualify for grant funds for purchasing additional conservation land. And so, for instance, these funds could either be for towns or for the 300 committee to apply for. And also, as you see with the Coonamessett Reservation Project, it qualifies the towns to have access to all these other resources that help you manage your lands. So, next. Okay, this proposed Great Thicket National Wildlife Refuge goes across several states: New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine. And these green areas are areas of cottontail focus areas, but these yellow areas are proposed additions to, or opposed, proposed units of this Great Thicket National Wildlife Refuge. So it'll be across a number of states. Next. So obviously we're most interested in ours. In our area, it would encompass the Mashpee National Wildlife Refuge, which is this green area, but it would also encompass areas that include the Coonamessett, our Coonamessett lands, and there's by designating lands, by designating this boundary, it doesn't bind the town to have to do anything specific. There would be, again, MOUs established, but it will enable the towns to qualify for funds to buy additional conservation land, and also, as I say, for the management of the lands. And that's it.
Okay.
So again, the letter that I'd like you to allow us to send would say that we agree in principle with this expanded and actually very large wildlife. The purpose of this is that the kinds of habitats that would be protected protect a number of threatened and endangered species that, as we all know, as our town gets fragmented with various kinds of projects, some of these species need bigger contiguous areas. And I know Mark has been working with Mashpee even initially to expand Mashpee, but this would serve that purpose.
Somebody want to
So
make
I
a
make a
motion?
motion that we support this with a letter? Is that what we need?
Second.
So we have a motion by Maury, second by Mary. Comments or questions from the commission? Comments or questions from the public? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for the vote.
We have one.
Whoop. Mark, sorry.
Let me just mention one thing.
Yeah.
When Betsy described that big thicket area, it's essentially an enhancement, enlargement of Mashpee National Wildlife Refuge and other areas. A lot of things that people sometimes get a little concerned about is, well, it includes a lot of private lands too, not just, state lands, town lands and all that. There's no legislation, there's no, private landowners don't have to do anything on their property if they don't want to. So I just want to make that thing clear, because when you look at some of these maps, you'll see it's like, oh my gosh, it includes all these developments, but that happens to be in the area that's included. And again, like Betsy said, it's good for purchasing new land, but also it's this partnership that's what's, in my mind, really important, because that's what's allowed us to do this thing with the, the burn, where we connect to, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Mass Fish and Wildlife, and we pool resources so we can get, big jobs done. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to call for the vote then. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved. All right.
Motion to adjourn?
No.
we got-
Orders.
Oh,
we got
flip your
four.
pages over.
Look at the back page.
All right, vote orders and conditions. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for the good work.
Yeah, excellent. All your volunteer work, thank you. There's none of,
I know,
it's
finally.
just, it's amazing. It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, so orders of conditions, Gifford Street, the town of Falmouth. That's Steve Rafferty's thing.
Mr. Chairman, I have all my paperwork is downstairs, so I'm gonna need the board to help me out with this one. This is, Steve's project to,
Lead remediation.
lead remediation at the old gun range. The reason the town needed to come before the Conservation Commission is because in order to access the site, they have to go through or very close to a small isolated wetland. I don't believe there's any more to the project other than going, like, just the road out there. They had proposed to brush cut it at first, and we said no, we'd rather them just mat the road.
Or just drive over it.
Yeah, just
Right.
drive over it and not, take a brush hog out there and clear the road. And they've also proposed to restore.
You talked about grubbing the whole thing, right?
Yeah, and then I think Steve was agreeable to just either mat it down, trim if needed, and just drive over it. Because they went out there the other day, and it's very easily accessible. Okay?
And the other thing was, it's all gonna be already in there about the inspection for the turtles and the guy on site and all
Yeah.
that. Okay.
No
And,
grubbing.
the other thing we had, that they, the soils, they're gonna use from the wastewater treatment plant, and they're not gonna bring any,
Right.
soils in from the landfill or anywhere
Oh,
else.
no, he already knows that.
Okay.
Yeah. No, wait.
And restoration. Yep, that was all I had in my notes.
Yep.
Move to adopt.
Second.
So motion by Betsy, second by Mary to adopt. Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved.
One question, not about that, but are they gonna need these for all the contractors? Because I'm sure those are expensive too.
Good point.
Yeah.
Okay, 36 Westwood Road. This one is drawn.
This
blank.
was Maria Hickey's invasive species and restoration project on the coastal bank. The first part of that bank from where the revetment is about 6 to 10 feet in is a healthy population of native species. She's gonna selectively target the invasives. And then we're gonna have a very strict monitoring plan on this. Once the invasives are removed, we want to have a set of photographs and staff meet out on site, and then the replanting starts. So it's not a wholesale removal of everything.
We discussed the fence on this too, but then it was taken off the table because it's in a velocity zone,
Correct.
right?
Yes,
right.
Okay.
No fence.
Now I remember this, all right.
Yep, and then, what else was there in here? All trees, anything that's native is to be marked, prior that you did that. All sumac to remain. And we did agree on that they could put the pinning, the mat with the pinning,
Yeah,
and that no, imported soils.
Yep.
yep, and then she's gonna use the species of juniper she wants,
Yeah, the, what are they, the Blue
But-
Point
yeah.
junipers?
but also have
She's
some
also-
native
right.
species.
Because
that
the
were
ones
required
that
in
were
the- in the
required in the
first.
previous order
Right.
conditions.
Or that had died
Yeah.
and have to be replanted.
And I also think we should add into all these orders now a note, I know it's probably in there, but it should maybe be bold, about no fertilizing. They're in the no fertilize zone, not the Falmouth friendly zone.
Falmouth friendly's out of your orders.
Oh, good, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Anything else? Okay, I'll entertain-
Move to approve the order as discussed.
Second?
So Mary, I think I heard Jamie.
No, Jamie's not on the phone.
Oh, he's not on the phone, Maury. Mary and Maury.
Jamie just says, keep moving on.
Okay.
Who's second?
I did.
Maury.
Maury.
Betsy feels the same
Third,
way.
fourth, fifth, whatever.
I'll be sending out an email for you guys to come and sign when you can. I just didn't have time today to print out the signature
come on.
pages.
Let us know when
I-
the
Slacking.
Any
I
other
was in a
comments or
meeting
questions on
From
36
1 to
Westwood?
4:45.
Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved. 400 Edgewater Drive, west.
All of you except for Kristen. This is
East,
where.
I'm sorry, east.
This is where Mr. Borselli was gonna put the wall in front, and now he's putting the wall in back and dismantling the wall and remove the beach nourishment from the project. And did ask his client for the buffer that Maury had suggested, but his client declined. So all the work is gonna be done behind the existing wall. The existing wall be removed. If you do want to allow them to bring in some fill in that dune restoration, I would suggest you do it under the staff's guidance.
Yeah,
because-
Yeah, excellent.
Because I'm not entirely comfortable with that aspect.
Yeah.
I
they
think
should-
it's gonna be fine. I don't think there was gonna be a
But if there was a
requirement.
especially high tide, it would get behind there and it would dig out the dune.
Pull it out.
So we'll write something, if fill needs staff approval,
Absolutely. Yep.
in dune area needs staff
Oh, did they ever get the permit for
And
the
the
dock?
nourishment's being denied, is that right?
approval prior to.
Permit for what, Maury?
We asked for the
Chapter 91.
the Chapter 91 license for the
I
dock.
think he did say it was licensed, I can't
Yeah, you
remember,
said
but
it,
if
let's
not,
make sure we have it.
like,
This might be another one of those after the fact, and
But, yeah, I think we said we need it for the record.
Yeah.
So
right.
it should be in the record before any work is done.
do you need a chapter 91 license for the dock or for the wall?
For the, he said he doesn't need one for
He
the wall.
doesn't need it. He said he doesn't
But
need
we
it for
want-
the wall
I-
because
I-
it doesn't meet.
Okay, so you want the chapter
Mean high
91s for the
tide.
dock.
Yeah, because usually when you do a plan, you put that on it, even if
In
you're-
record prior to constructing the wall?
I just wanted.
We just want it in the
We
record.
want it on the
We
plan.
want it.
Oh, okay,
I
all
thought
right.
we provided that.
No, he didn't.
I
Oh, did he?
Give that to
I
us
think
last
you may
week?
be right, I'm trying to.
I
look at it here.
I can't remember, guys.
Well, there's no dock, he says on it, add notes and dock license, but there's no dock license number on here.
I'll make
He
sure
just
we
had the
have.
interim license, I guess.
I'll double,
You'll figure out.
I'll double check,
Okay. So, yeah, before compliance can be issued.
yeah.
Okay? All right, anything else?
Nope, I make a motion to accept as discussed.
Second.
So we got Maury and Mike. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved. 93 BB Acres Road.
This is the amended plan to add the pea stone instead of lawn, the rinse station and the AC units. Do we have the AC units? That
Live
was
in
it.
the riverfront? Is that?
It is in the riverfront. The original project exceeded the amount allowed, the amount of clearing those, allowed in the regs on the riverfront.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Jen?
Yes.
In the original plan was, so I don't have a problem with the two little bump outs for AC and whatever,
Yeah.
but where the pea stone is, did that say lawn in the?
Correct.
Okay, well then I have a problem with pea stone, because even though it's not very much vegetation, if you have a lawn, it absorbs nitrogen.
Okay.
As I point out to people,
We're not gonna allow them to fertilize.
no, as I point out to people, the reason you fertilize lawn is because the plants like nitrogen. So if you don't fertilize it, and even though it's a small amount, that's what was required, and that was a problematic decision when we went through it the first time.
What you put in, you can't put fertilizer on it to get it started. You can't, here it sits, and we're gonna, I don't see the benefit, and I see harm in removing the pea stone. I don't get it.
I have a lawn, and I don't fertilize it, and it's plenty
That's
green,
fine.
it takes up a lot of nitrogen every year.
And while it's sitting there, you got runoff. It's there, it's stable. Maybe not what I put there, but I don't see the.
How much square footage is this, Jim?
Mary, you had some?
Huh?
She has a
Oh, okay.
I don't know, Mary, it's just in the back of the house.
Yeah,
It's about 2 feet wide, the length of the house.
I didn't use a scale, because I don't have this plan, what I did with
Having walked it.
it.
I take your point, Betsy. I don't
The reason the
I'm
staff was
inclined to be
uncomfortable
more
with it
permissive.
was from a resource area buffer calculation standpoint. I did not want to see projects all of a sudden replacing their lawns and putting pea stones, and then all of a sudden wanting to use it in the impervious or pervious that doesn't support natural vegetation calculation.
Right, we can put that in the order though, right?
Yes, I mean, in this case, it's outside 100 feet of, it's outside any resource area buffer zones, but it's solely within the riverfront. But that's what staff's initial concern was. And if you want to make a finding to that effect, that's fine, we can. But that's where our thinking was at first, so we,
So make a finding that it is not in the resource area buffer
yeah,
according to FWR.
yeah. That was one of our concerns, so.
So we're gonna let them leave the piece down with the findings.
I think we're gonna have to. I mean, we're
Alright,
gonna
then-
go tear it up and then put grass down.
Fertilize it and water it, and, because they won't believe the rules. So I'm gonna make a motion that we accept it as discussed with maintaining the pea stone with a finding that it's not within our buffer, yada, yada, yada.
Second.
So Laurie and Mary. Any other discussion?
Who seconded, Mary?
Mary,
Mary?
M&M.
No, I'm hearing no other discussion. I'm gonna call for the vote then. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Abstentions, unanimous, so moved. I'll take a motion.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion moved by Maury, second by Mary. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. We're adjourned.
And I could be wrong.
Unfortunately, I'm not gonna be here, I don't think.
I don't